I expected the certified letter to be a past due notice from the electric company. Instead, I pulled out a crisp sheet of paper sent by my mother. It was an invoice totaling $347,000, stamped with a single, brutal subject line: cost of raising a failure. Standing in my cold kitchen, I realized she had effectively put a price tag on my existence, and she expected payment in full within 90 days. The radiator in my Hartfield apartment clanked like a dying engine, a rhythmic metal-hacking cough that kept time with the pounding in my head. It was 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I had just walked up 5 flights of stairs carrying 3 orders of pad thai and a lukewarm bubble tea for a customer who did not tip. I stripped off my damp windbreaker, the one with the delivery app logo peeling off the chest, and tossed it onto the futon. My apartment was a shoebox, the kind of place real estate agents called cozy to avoid saying claustrophobic. It was a far cry from the glass-walled office at Ridgeway Analytics, where I had spent the last 5 years building forecasting models and tracking market volatility. That life felt like a fever dream now. 6 months ago, the axe fell. Corporate restructuring, they said. A strategic pivot. I was 32 years old, armed with a degree in finance and a resume full of accolades, and I was paying my rent by delivering noodles to college students who had more disposable income than I did. I checked the mail on the counter. Usually, it was a grim parade of student loan statements and credit card offers I did not qualify for. But today there was something different. A stiff, white envelope sat on top of the pile. It was certified mail. The return address was in Riverbend, my hometown, written in a handwriting I would know anywhere. It was tight, looping, and aggressive. My mother's handwriting. My stomach did a slow roll. Certified mail usually meant legal trouble. Had I missed a tax payment? Was there an issue with the old car title? I ripped the tab on the envelope, my fingers shaking slightly. I pulled out 3 sheets of heavy bond paper. Stapled at the corner, it was not a letter, it was a spreadsheet. At the top, centered in bold, capitalized font, were the words, "Invoice for services rendered." Below that, a subject line that made the air leave my lungs: cost of raising a failure. I blinked, sure I was misreading it. I leaned against the laminate counter, feeling the cold seep into my hip, and read it again. Cost of raising a failure. I scanned down the page. It was an itemized list, organized by year, starting from the year of my birth, 1992, hospital delivery and postnatal care, out of pocket, $2,400, 1993, formula, diapers, clothing, $1,800, 1998, dance lessons, quit after 2 months, $450, 2004, orthodontics, braces and retainer, $5,200, 2008, SAT, prep course, $600, 2010, prom dress and alterations, $300. The list went on, page after page. It was obsessive. It was terrifying. Every field trip, every doctor's copay, every pair of sneakers was accounted for. But it was not just financial expenses. Towards the bottom, under a section labeled Intangible Assets, the entries became unhinged. Emotional labor, listening to teenage drama, 2005 to 2010, $10,000, stress-induced high blood pressure treatment, $5,000, room and board, post-college gap year, $12,000. At the very bottom of the final page, there was a grand total, bolded and underlined twice, $347,000. Below the total was a payment schedule, due in full within 90 days. It read, "Failure to acknowledge debt will result in public disclosure of financial burden to the Simmons family circle and extended community group on Facebook." I dropped the paper. It fluttered to the linoleum floor. Landing face up, the silence in the apartment was deafening. I felt a hot, prickling shame climb up my neck. The same shame I used to feel when I was 10 years old and asked for a new backpack, only to be told that we could not afford electricity if I kept wanting things. Cost of raising a failure. The word failure echoed in the empty room. It was the word I had been whispering to myself every night since the layoff. I had done everything right. I studied hard. I got the scholarships. I moved to the city. I sent money home on birthdays and Christmas. I tried to be the investment that paid off. And here I was, 32, single, unemployed in my field, and holding a bill for my own existence. I snatched the paper off the floor and marched to my laptop. My fingers flew across the keys, drafting a response. Mom, are you insane? Is this a joke? You can't bill a child for growing up. Do you have any idea how sick this looks? I stared at the blinking cursor. The anger was there, hot and bright, but beneath it was something older and heavier. Fear. My mother, Elaine Simmons, did not do jokes. She did campaigns. She did attrition. If I fought this over email, she would screenshot it, crop it out of context, and post it for my aunts and cousins to see, captioning it with a sad emoji about ungrateful children. I deleted the draft. I closed the laptop. Thanksgiving was in 3 days. I had been planning to skip it, claiming I had to work. But I could not let this sit. I needed to look her in the eye. I needed to see if she would actually hand me this piece of paper in person, or if this was just something she did from the safety of a post office box. I packed a bag. I threw in my one nice blazer, just in case I needed to look like I still had a job, and a bottle of wine that cost $12, but looked like it cost $20. The drive to Riverbend took 4 hours. The city skyline dissolved into suburban sprawl, which eventually gave way to the flat, gray stretches of rural highway that defined my childhood. The trees were bare, their skeletal branches scratching at the low, iron-colored sky. Riverbend had not changed, which was the problem. It was a town that refused to move forward. The main street was a collection of faded brick storefronts and vape shops. I turned onto Elm Street, my tires crunching over the potholes that the town council promised to fix every election year. The Simmons house stood at the end of a cul-de-sac. It was a split-level ranch that had once been white, but was now the color of dirty dishwater. The gutter hung loose over the garage, a repair my father had promised to make before he left 15 years ago, and one my mother refused to hire anyone for because it was wasteful spending. My brother Evan's car was in the driveway, a sensible sedan, leased. Evan was 26, currently finishing his master's degree in supply chain management. He was the golden boy, mostly because he had mastered the art of nodding while my mother spoke and never disagreeing with her view of reality. I parked my beat-up hatchback behind his car. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that made my palms sweat. I gripped the steering wheel for a long moment, breathing in the smell of old upholstery and stale coffee. You are an adult, I told myself. You are a financial analyst. You deal with millions of dollars in variances. You can handle Elaine. I grabbed my bag and the wine and walked to the front door. Elaine opened it before I could knock. She was wearing a floral apron over a sweater that I recognized from her heavy rotation 10 years ago. Her hair was dyed a fierce, chemical auburn, stiff with hairspray. "Sarah!" she exclaimed. Her voice was pitched high, that specific tone she used when she wanted the neighbors to hear how happy we were. "Hi, Mom," I said. She pulled me into a hug. It was sharp and brief. I felt the rigid line of her shoulder blades and the distinct lack of warmth. She smelled of vanilla extract and bleach. "You made good time," she said, pulling back and scanning my face. "You look tired. Are you eating enough? You look pale." "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with work." She raised an eyebrow. A small, knowing tick. "Work, right. Well, come in. Evan is already here. He brought me flowers." I walked into the living room. The carpet was the same beige shag from the 90s, matted down in the high-traffic areas. The air inside was stiflingly warm, the thermostat cranked up to 78 degrees. Evan was sitting on the couch, scrolling on his phone. He looked up and gave me a tight, sympathetic smile. "Hey, Sarah," he said. "Long drive?" "Standard," I said. I set the wine on the coffee table. Elaine picked it up, inspected the label, and set it back down without a word. The judgment was silent but deafening. Dinner was ready within the hour. We sat at the round oak table in the dining room. The centerpiece was a cornucopia basket that had seen better decades. Elaine had made her signature tuna casserole and a green bean salad that was mostly mayonnaise. For the first 20 minutes, we talked about nothing: the weather, the price of gas, Evan's classes. I focused on cutting my casserole into perfect, geometric squares, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped when Elaine cleared the plates and returned with a manila folder. She placed it on the table, right next to the butter dish. "I assume you got my letter," she said. Her voice was casual, conversational, as if she were asking if I had received a birthday card. I put my fork down. The metal clinked loudly against the china. "I got it," I said. Evan shifted in his seat. He looked at the folder, then at me, then down at his lap. "And?" Elaine asked. She folded her hands on the tablecloth. "And I think it's insane." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you sent me an invoice for $347,000. You charged me for diapers. I charged you for the investment I made." She corrected. She opened the folder and pulled out a fresh copy of the invoice. Smoothing it out. "I've been working with a family accountability coach online. It's a very supportive group. We talk about how modern parenting has become a one-way street. Parents give, and children take and leave. It's about reestablishing the value exchange." "Value exchange?" I repeated. "I'm your daughter, not a mutual fund." She pulled out a second sheet of paper. It was a color-coded spreadsheet I hadn't seen in the mail. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a red bar graph. "This represents the resources diverted from my retirement to support your adolescence. And this," she pointed to a tiny blue sliver, "is the return on investment I have received since you left home." I felt a vein throb in my temple. "Mom, I worked part-time at the diner from the day I turned 16. I bought my own car. I paid for my own books in college. You lived in my house," Elaine said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming steelier. "You ate my food. You used my electricity. And when you graduated, you moved to the city to chase a fancy career that clearly hasn't worked out. Considering you're delivering food on a bicycle now." I froze. I hadn't told her about the delivery gig. "How do you know about that?" I asked. Elaine smiled. A thin, tight expression. "A mother knows. Or maybe Aunt Linda saw you when she was visiting Hartfield last week. It doesn't matter. The point is, you chose failure. You had a good job, and you lost it. You're 32 years old. Sarah, you're scraping by. You're a liability." "I didn't choose to get laid off," I snapped. "The entire division was cut. That's how the economy works. That is how excuses work," she countered. "Evan isn't laid off. Evan is building a future." Evan finally spoke up, his voice meek. "Mom, come on. Sarah's trying. It's a tough market." Elaine turned on him. "Don't you defend mediocrity." "Evan, we talked about this. Accountability is love." She turned back to me. "This bill isn't a punishment. Sarah, it's a wake-up call. You need to understand the weight of what you owe. I sacrificed my life for you. I stayed in this town, in this house, to give you stability, and you treat it like it was nothing. I owe you $347,000 because you raised me?" I asked, my voice rising. "That's not how parenting works. You chose to have kids. And I expected those kids to become successful contributors to the family, not burdens who lose their jobs and hide it," she said. She tapped the invoice. 90 days. "Sarah, we can work out a payment plan. But if you think you can just walk away from this, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of daughter you are. I'll post the receipts. I'll show everyone how much I spent on those dance lessons you quit, how much I spent on your teeth, how much I suffered so you could go play businesswoman in the city and fail." I stood up. My chair scraped violently against the floor. "I'm not paying you a dime," I said. "This is delusional." Elaine didn't flinch. She just looked at me with cold, flat eyes. "You know," she said softly, "Grandma Maggie agrees with me. The mention of my grandmother stopped me halfway to the door. Maggie was the only person in this family who had ever made me feel like I didn't have to earn my space in the room. What? I said. I showed her the figures, Elaine said, picking at a loose thread on the tablecloth. She was shocked. She had no idea how much of a drain you've been. She agrees that kids owe their parents. In fact, she's thinking about updating her will. She thinks it's better to leave her estate to someone who respects the family legacy, like Evan. I looked at Evan. He went pale. Mom, don't bring Grandma into this, he said. She's lucid. Evan, Elaine snapped. She knows what's what. She knows Sarah is a sinking ship. Why should she throw good money after bad? My heart hammered against my ribs. Maggie was my lifeline, not financially. I never asked her for money. But emotionally, if Elaine had poisoned her against me, if she had convinced Maggie that I was some leech who abandoned the family. I couldn't bear it. I grabbed my purse. I'm going to bed, I said. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of the dining room, down the hallway, and into my old bedroom. It was a shrine to a person I no longer was. High school debate trophies gathered dust on the shelf. A poster of a boy band I hadn't listened to in 15 years curled at the edges. The room smelled of lavender sachets and neglect. I closed the door and leaned against it, shaking. She was bluffing. She had to be. Maggie would never agree to this. Maggie was the one who slipped me $20 bills when I was a teenager so I could go to the movies. Maggie was the one who told me to get out of Riverbend and never look back. But Maggie was also 84. She was living in Maple Grove Residence, an assisted living facility 20 minutes away. Her memory had been slipping lately, or so Elaine said. If Elaine was in her ear every day, showing her spreadsheets, twisting the truth, I pulled out my phone. It was 9:30, late for a nursing home, but I didn't care. I dialed Maggie's number. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when a click sounded, followed by a rustling noise. Hello? Her voice was thin, scratchy, but alert. Grandma? It's Sarah. Sarah? There was a pause, and then warmth flooded her tone. Sarah. Honey, is everything all right? You're calling late. I sank onto the twin bed, clutching the phone. I'm at Mom's house. I came for Thanksgiving. Oh, that's nice. Dear, Elaine didn't tell me you were coming. Grandma, I need to ask you something. It's important. What is it? You sound upset. Mom sent me a bill. I said, the words tumbling out. An invoice for $347,000. She says it's the cost of raising me. She says you saw it. She says you agreed with it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. The static of the connection hissed in my ear. Grandma? A bill? Maggie said. Her voice wasn't confused in a senile way. It was confused in a sharp, baffled way. A bill for what? For raising me? For diapers? For food? She says you think I owe her for being born. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, Maggie said, her voice gaining strength. I never saw any bill. Elaine told me she was making a scrapbook for you. A memory book? A scrapbook? I asked. Yes. She brought over some old receipts. Said she was putting together a collage of your childhood. I thought it was sentimental. I closed my eyes. A scrapbook. Elaine had framed her evidence gathering as a craft project. She threatened me. Grandma, I whispered. She said if I don't pay, she'll humiliate me online. She said you were changing your will to cut me out because I'm a failure. The line went quiet again, but this time the silence felt heavy, charged with a sudden, cold anger. She said what? Maggie asked. She said you were leaving everything to Evan. Sarah, listen to me, Maggie said. Her voice was crystal clear, stripping away the frailty of age. I have not changed my will, and I certainly do not think you are a failure. You come see me tomorrow, first thing in the morning. Don't bring your mother, just you. Okay, I said, tears pricking my eyes. Okay, Grandma, I'll be there. Get some sleep. Honey, don't let Elaine get in your head. She's always been creative with her accounting. We hung up. I sat in the dark, the phone warm in my hand. Creative with her accounting, that was one way to put it. I stood up and paced the small room. The invoice was still in my bag. I pulled it out again, needing to see the absurdity of it one more time to ground myself. I turned on the desk lamp and spread the papers out on the bedspread. Diapers, braces, emotional labor. I scanned the list again, my analyst brain taking over. I was looking for patterns, for logic in the madness. The numbers were specific, too specific. You don't estimate $2,400 for hospital delivery unless you're looking at a bill. My eyes drifted to the second page. I had skimmed it earlier, too angry to process the details. But now, in the quiet of the room, one line item jumped out at me. It was dated August 2010. The month I left for college. Lost inheritance. Opportunity. $120,000. I stared at the number. $120,000. It was the second largest single item on the list, dwarfed only by the total, but unlike the other items, medical, housing, food, this one had no description. Just lost inheritance opportunity. What did that mean? Had Elaine turned down an inheritance because of me? Had someone died and left her money that she couldn't take because she had a daughter? It didn't make sense. My father had no money. Elaine's parents, Maggie and my late grandfather, were not wealthy, or at least, not wealthy enough to be handing out six-figure inheritances that could be lost. I looked at the date again. August 2010. That was the summer I started at Lockridge University. I remembered the financial aid office. I remembered the panic when my Pell Grant didn't cover everything. I remembered Elaine telling me there was no money, that I had to take out the maximum in student loans if I wanted to go. $120,000. The number sat there on the page, black and stark. It didn't look like a cost. It looked like a balance. A cold feeling started in my gut, different from the anger, different from the shame. It was the instinct I used when I audited quarterly reports and found a variance that couldn't be explained by bad luck. Something was wrong. I folded the invoice and shoved it under my pillow. I lay down, listening to the wind rattle the loose gutter outside. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to lie here and watch the ceiling until the sun came up, and then I was going to find out what exactly my mother meant by a lost opportunity, because if there was one thing I knew about numbers, it was that they didn't lie, but people did. The next morning, the house was silent when I crept out. I didn't want to see Elaine. I didn't want to drink her coffee or listen to her talk about accountability. I just wanted to get to Maple Grove. I drove fast, the morning mist clinging to the fields. My mind was a loop of the invoice and Maggie's voice. She's always been creative with her accounting. Maple Grove Residence was a sprawling brick complex on the edge of Glenwick, the next town over. It was clean and smelled of lemon polish and oatmeal. I signed in at the front desk, my hand shaking as I wrote my name. Maggie was in room 3B. I walked down the hallway, passing residents in wheelchairs who nodded sleepily. I found Maggie sitting in her armchair by the window, a book in her lap. She looked smaller than I remembered, her white hair wispy, her hands knobby with arthritis. But when she turned to look at me, her blue eyes were sharp. "Sarah," she said. I went to her and knelt beside the chair, hugging her waist. She smelled of lavender and old paper. "I missed you, Grandma." I said, "I missed you too," she said, patting my hair. "Now, stand up. Let me look at you." I stood. She scrutinized me, her gaze sweeping over my face. "You look like you've been in a fight," she said. "I feel like it." I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the invoice. "I need you to see this," I said. Maggie took the papers. She put on her reading glasses, the ones that hung on a chain around her neck. She adjusted them and began to read. The room was silent except for the hum of the heater. I watched her face. I saw her brow furrow. I saw her lips press into a thin white line. When she got to the page with the emotional labor charge, she let out a sharp scoff. "Emotional labor," she muttered. "The woman hasn't listened to anyone but herself since 1984. She flipped the page, and then she stopped. She went rigid. Her finger hovered over the paper. I leaned in. She was looking at the line item. That line, lost inheritance opportunity, made my stomach drop. Maggie stared at the number. Her hand started to tremble. "Grandma?" I asked softly. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "That number," she whispered. "What about it?" $120,000. She said, It's the trust." "The trust?" I asked. "What trust?" Maggie looked back at the paper, her breathing becoming shallow. "When you were born," she said, her voice shaking, "your grandfather and I, we started a trust for you, for college. We put money in every month, every birthday, every Christmas. We transferred stocks. We wanted you to have options." I stared at her. "I never had a trust. Grandma, I took out loans. I have $60,000 in debt. Mom said there was no money." Maggie's face crumbled. "Elaine was the trustee. She whispered, she was supposed to manage it until you turned 18. She told me it was all gone. She said the market crashed. She said the fees ate it up. She said she used what was left to pay for your dorms." I looked at the invoice. The date, August 2010. The amount, $120,000. She didn't lose it. I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. She took it. Maggie dropped the paper into her lap. She looked sick. She didn't just take it. "Sarah," she said, her voice barely audible, "she's billing you for the guilt of stealing it." My mind raced back to the bank visits, the lost paperwork, the way Elaine always intercepted the mail, the way she had pushed me to sign loan documents without reading them, saying she had handled the details. I stood up, the room spinning slightly. "I need to see the records," I said. Maggie nodded slowly. She reached for her walker. "Help me up," she said. "We're going to the credit union." "Grandma, you don't have to." "Help me up," she commanded, her voice fierce. "I may be old, and I may be in this place, but I will not let that woman rewrite history. If she stole that money, Sarah, if she stole your future." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. We walked out of the nursing home together, a slow, determined march. I helped her into my car. As I buckled her in, I looked at the invoice one last time before tossing it into the back seat. Cost of raising a failure. She was right about the cost. She was just wrong about who was paying it. We drove to the Northbridge Credit Union in silence, the gray sky hanging low over us, heavy with the promise of a storm. The automatic doors of Northbridge Credit Union slid open with a pneumatic hiss that sounded too loud in the quiet morning. I held the door for Grandma Maggie, watching her navigate the threshold with her walker. She moved with a grim determination that made her seem taller than her 5 feet, though I could see the tremor in her hands where she gripped the aluminum handles. The branch was empty save for a single teller counting a stack of cash and a loan officer sitting in a glass-walled cubicle. The air smelled of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. It was the smell of small-town commerce, a scent I associated with waiting in line with my mother while she argued about overdraft fees. We sat across from a man whose nameplate read Gary S. Miller, branch manager. He looked like he had been part of the building's original construction, gray, sturdy, and weary. He typed on his keyboard with 2 index fingers, his eyes narrowing behind bifocals as he pulled up the archived records Maggie had requested. It took 10 minutes of silence. The only sound was the hum of the computer tower under the desk. "Here it is, Mr." Miller said finally. He adjusted his glasses. "The Maggie Hale Education Trust, opened in 1992. Maggie leaned forward, her knuckles white. "Is it active?" Mr. Miller shook his head slowly. "No, ma'am. This account was closed out on September 12th, 2008. "Closed?" Maggie whispered. Her voice was thin, like paper tearing. But I was told it was being drawn down for tuition. Sarah didn't start college until 2010. Mr. Miller turned the monitor slightly so we could see. Though the glare of the fluorescent lights made it hard to read, he pointed to a line at the bottom of the ledger. There was a single. Massive withdrawal. $112,450.62. Mr. Miller read aloud. Transferred to account ending in 4429. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. 4429. That was the PIN code I used for the garage door opener growing up. It was the last 4 digits of my mother's primary checking account. Who authorized the transfer? I asked. My voice sounded calm, which terrified me. It was the voice I used when I had to tell a client their portfolio had tanked. Mr. Miller clicked a few more times, pulling up a scanned document. He printed it out and slid it across the mahogany desk. It was a transfer authorization form. The signature at the bottom was bold, looping, and aggressive. Elaine Simmons. Beside it was a smaller, shakier signature. Maggie's. I didn't sign that, Maggie said. She stared at the paper, her eyes watering. I was in the hospital in September of 2008. I had my hip replacement then. I couldn't even hold a pen, let alone drive to the bank. Mr. Miller looked uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. Well, Mrs. Simmons was listed as a co-trustee. The structure of the account allowed either party to authorize withdrawals for the benefit of the beneficiary. For the benefit of the beneficiary, I repeated. That's me. Technically, yes, Mr. Miller said. But once the funds are moved to a joint personal account, we lose visibility. We can't say how they were spent. I picked up the paper. The date stared back at me. September 12th, 2008. I did the math in my head. In 2008, the market was crashing. My mother's interior design business, which had never been more than a hobby she threw money at, was bleeding cash. She had bought a new SUV that year. We had gone on a trip to Florida that she said was a necessary mental health break. She had liquidated my college fund 2 years before I even graduated high school. I looked at Maggie. She was slumped in the chair, looking suddenly very old. She told me it was the market. Maggie whispered. She told me the crash wiped it out. She cried on my shoulder. Sarah, she cried and said she was so sorry there was nothing left for you. I reached out and took Maggie's hand. It was ice cold. I remember my college years at Lockridge University. I remembered sitting in the financial aid office, a fresh-faced 18-year-old, listening to a counselor tell me that my mother's income was too high for full grants, but that she had refused to contribute to my expected family contribution. Your mother says she has no liquidity, the counselor had said. I remembered the shame. I remembered taking out the maximum Stafford loans. I remembered the private loans with 6% interest. I remembered working the closing shift at the campus coffee shop, the grind, scraping burnt milk off the steamer wand at 2 a.m. while my friends were studying or sleeping, just to pay for textbooks. I had spent 4 years exhausted, anxious, and feeling like a burden. I had graduated with $60,000 in debt that I was still paying off, and the whole time, my mother had been sitting on over $100,000 that belonged to me. Can we get a copy of the deposit record? I asked Mr. Miller. Proof that it went to Elaine Simmons? I can give you the transfer receipt, he said. We left the bank with a single sheet of paper that weighed more than the car I was driving. The drive back to Riverbend was a blur of gray highway and bare trees. I didn't turn on the radio. My mind was a chaotic spreadsheet. Moving numbers from the column marked mother to the column marked thief. Maggie didn't speak until we were parking in front of the Simmons house. I need to rest, she said. Take me to my room at Maple Grove first. I can't look at her right now. No, I said gently. We need to do this. We need to know the truth. But I'll take you back if you want. No, she said, straightening her coat. You're right. If I go back to that home now, I'll never have the courage to say it. Let's go. We walked into the house at 5:30. The smell of pot roast filled the air, savory and comforting, a lie in olfactory form. Elaine was in the kitchen, chopping carrots. Evan was setting the table. Well, look who's back, Elaine said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. I thought you two abandoned us for the day. Maggie, you missed your afternoon soaps. She bustled over to give Maggie a hug, but Maggie took a step back, positioning her walker like a shield. Don't, Maggie said. Elaine froze. Her smile faltered, then hardened. Excuse me? We went to the bank. Mom, I said, I was standing by the refrigerator, my arms crossed. I felt a strange vibration in my chest, like a wire pulled too tight. Elaine turned to me. Her eyes narrowed. "Which bank?" "Northbridge Credit Union." I said, "We looked up the trust, the one you told Grandma the market destroyed." The room went deadly silent. Evan stopped with a fork suspended mid-air. "I don't know what you're talking about," Elaine said. She turned back to the carrots, her knife hitting the cutting board with a loud thwack. That was years ago. The economy was in shambles. Everyone lost money. "We have the transfer slip." "Mom," I said, September 12th, 2008. You withdrew $112,000. You moved it to your personal checking account. Elaine stopped chopping. She stood with her back to us, her shoulders rigid. "You're digging through private financial history?" she asked, her voice low. "Is that what you do now? You fail at your job, so you come home to audit your mother?" I walked over and slammed the transfer slip onto the counter next to the carrots. "It wasn't your money," I shouted. "It was mine. It was for my tuition. Do you have any idea what my life was like in college? Do you know I ate instant oatmeal for dinner 3 nights a week? Do you know I'm still paying off loans?" Elaine spun around. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild. "It was family money," she screamed. "There is no yours or mine in this family. Sarah, I was drowning. The business was failing. The house needed a roof. Your father had just stopped paying alimony. Dad left 3 years before that," I yelled back. "And whose fault was that?" Elaine hissed. She took a step toward me, jabbing a finger in my face. "Do you think Mark left because of me? He left because the pressure of this family. The pressure of raising 2 ungrateful children broke him, and he left me with nothing." She grabbed the counter, breathing hard. "That money from Maggie, that was my compensation," she said, her voice dropping to a trembling whisper. "It was the least she could do. She raised a daughter who got left. She owed me. And you owed me too." I stared at her, stunned by the sheer, twisting logic. "You stole my college fund because Dad divorced you?" "I survived," Elaine shrieked. "I kept this roof over your head. I bought you that prom dress. I paid for your braces. That $100,000 kept us alive. Sarah, it wasn't theft. It was reimbursement for the life I lost." Evan made a small, choking sound from the dining room. "Mom," he said. "Mom, that's not right." Elaine whipped her head toward him. "Shut up, Evan. You don't know anything about it. You weren't there when the creditors were calling every day. You were a child." Maggie spoke then. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. "I gave that money to Sarah," Maggie said. "Not to you, Elaine, to Sarah." "And I am her mother," Elaine yelled, throwing her hands up. "I decide how resources are allocated." And look at her. Mom, look at her. She's 32 and delivering takeout. Clearly, the money wouldn't have made a difference. She's a failure with or without a degree. The cruelty of it took my breath away. It wasn't just that she had taken the money. It was that she truly believed she was the victim. In her mind, the $347,000 bill she sent me wasn't a joke. It was the balance she felt the world still owed her. "I'm leaving," I said. I grabbed my keys. "I can't be here. I'm taking Grandma back to Maple Grove. And then I'm staying at a motel." "You walk out that door, and you're out of the family," Elaine shouted after me. "I'll cut you off." "You already did," I screamed back. "You cut me off 15 years ago when you stole my future." I ushered Maggie out the door, leaving Elaine standing in the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of roast beef and the wreckage of her own lies. The motel was a roadside dive called the Blue Heron. The neon sign buzzed, the H flickering in and out of existence. I paid for a room with a credit card that was dangerously close to its limit. After I dropped Maggie off at Maple Grove, where she sat on her bed, silent and staring at the wall, refusing to say a word about what had happened, I sat on the lumpy motel mattress and stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Evan. "Hey," I stared at the screen. "Are you okay?" He wrote, "No." I typed back, "I'm not." 3 dots appeared, danced, and disappeared. Then, "Do you really think she stole it? I mean, like, legally?" I saw the paper. Evan, she forged Grandma's signature. She took it all. Another long pause. "She keeps talking about my tuition." Evan wrote, "She says she's paying for my master's. But now I'm wondering, where is that money coming from?" I felt a pang of pity for him. Evan was the golden child, but gold was heavy. He was carrying the weight of her expectations. And now, the weight of her deception. "Be careful. Ev," I wrote, "she sees us as assets, and she liquidates assets when she needs cash. She told me I'm her retirement plan." He replied, "She says it all the time. When you make big money, you'll take care of your mother." It freaks me out. I didn't know what to say to that. I put the phone down. I was wearing Maggie's old wool coat. It was freezing in the motel room, the heater rattling uselessly in the corner. I had grabbed the coat from her closet at Maple Grove earlier that morning when she complained of a draft, and I hadn't given it back when I dropped her off. I wrapped it tighter around myself, burying my hands in the deep pockets. My fingers brushed against something stiff. I pulled it out. It was a crumpled piece of paper. A message slip from the front desk at Maple Grove. Message for Margaret Hale. From First National Bank Credit Services. Time, 10:15 a.m., Tuesday. I frowned. Maggie didn't bank at First National. She used the credit union. I unfolded the slip. The handwriting belonged to one of the nurses. Message: "Please call regarding the past due payment on the Platinum Visa ending in 8890. Urgent." I stared at the slip. Maggie didn't have a credit card. She had cut them all up 5 years ago when she moved into the facility. She paid for her incidentals with a debit card linked to her small pension. Platinum Visa. A cold realization washed over me. Colder than the motel room. Elaine hadn't just stopped at the trust fund. If there was a credit card in Maggie's name that Maggie didn't know about, it meant identity theft. It meant Elaine was using her mother's credit score to fund the lifestyle she claimed she deserved. I reached for my phone again, my thumb hovering over the dial pad. I needed to call the number on the slip. I needed to know how deep this rot went. But first, I pulled up the picture I had taken of the invoice. Cost of raising a failure. I looked at the total, $347,000. Elaine had projected her own moral bankruptcy onto me. She had handed me a bill for the exact amount of souls she had sold. I dialed the number for First National. An automated voice answered. "Please enter the 16-digit card number." I didn't have it. I pressed 0. I waited. "Representative," I said to the robot. A tired woman answered. "First National. This is Brenda." "Hi," I said. "I'm calling on behalf of my grandmother, Margaret Hale. She's confused about a past due notice she received." "One moment." Brenda said, "Can you verify the address on file?" I gave Maggie's old address, the house where she lived before Maple Grove. "No, that's not what I have." Brenda said, "I have a listing for 42 Elm Street." 42 Elm Street. That was the Simmons house. My mother's house. My hand gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. "Okay," I said. "And can you tell me the balance on the account?" "I can't give out specific details without verification," Brenda said. "But I can tell you the minimum payment of $400 is 3 months overdue. The account is in default." "Thank you," I whispered. I hung up. I lay back on the bed. The message slip crunched in my fist. The ceiling fan spun slowly above me, a wobbly, dizzying circle. It wasn't just a college fund. It was everything. Elaine was cannibalizing the family to keep up appearances, and she was gaslighting us into believing we owed her for the privilege. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I formulated a plan. I needed a lawyer, not a corporate lawyer, not someone from my old firm. I needed someone who knew how to fight in the mud, someone who could look at a spreadsheet and see the blood. Tomorrow, I was going to find one, and then I was going to audit Elaine Simmons until there was nowhere left for her to hide. I drove back to Hartfield with the taste of motel coffee and betrayal coating my tongue. The city looked different than when I had left it just 2 days ago. The towering glass structures of the financial district, where I used to spend 12 hours a day building risk models, now felt like a fortress I was locked out of. I bypassed my apartment and drove straight to the Briarwood neighborhood. Briarwood was the part of the city where the gentrification stopped abruptly, as if the developers had run out of money or courage. The Briarwood Community Legal Center was wedged between a discount wig shop and a bodega with bars on the windows. The waiting rooms smelled of damp wool and pine sol. It was crowded with people clutching manila envelopes, tired mothers, confused seniors. And me. I had an appointment with Jenna Park. I had found her name on a forum for elder advocacy at 3 a.m, searching on my phone in the dark motel room. Jenna looked younger than I expected, maybe 30, with her hair pulled back in a severe bun that pulled at her temples. She wore a cardigan that had seen better days, but her eyes were sharp, dark, and assessing. She ushered me into a small office that was stacked floor to ceiling with files. "Have a seat," she said, clearing a stack of legal pads off the guest chair. "I read your intake form. You said your mother sent you an invoice?" I pulled the document from my bag. It was becoming crinkled at the edges, a physical artifact of my nightmare. "She calls it the cost of raising a failure," I said, sliding it across the scratched desk. "But that is not why I'm here. I am here because of this." I placed the transfer receipt from the Northbridge Credit Union on top of the invoice. Jenna put on a pair of reading glasses and leaned in. She read in silence for a long time. I watched her eyes track down the columns of the invoice, then shift to the bank receipt. She didn't laugh at the absurdity of the $347,000 bill. She didn't gasp. She just hummed, a low vibration in her throat. "This transfer," she said, tapping the receipt. $112,000, authorized by Elaine Simmons and Margaret Hale. "You said Margaret denies signing this? She says she was in the hospital having her hip replaced on that date." I said, "She says she never saw the money." Jenna leaned back, clasping her hands. "Elder financial exploitation is tricky. Sarah, it is rarely a stranger breaking in and stealing jewelry. It is almost always family. It is the daughter who has power of attorney and thinks she deserves a little extra for her trouble. It is the son who thinks his inheritance is coming anyway. So why not take an advance?" She looked at me. If your mother had power of attorney, she might argue that she was within her rights to move funds to a joint account for ease of management. The burden of proof is on us to show that the money was not used for Maggie's benefit. It wasn't. I said, "It went into a black hole. And now, I think she is opening credit cards in my grandmother's name." Jenna nodded grimly. "That is cleaner. That is fraud. But to prove the pattern, I need to see the paperwork. I need to see every document where your mother's name appears next to Maggie's." "Can you get access to Maggie's records?" "I can try." I said, "Get me dates, signatures, and account changes." Jenna said, "And Sarah? Be prepared for what you find. Usually, the first discovery is just the tip of the iceberg. When family members start stealing, they rarely stop at one account." I drove back to Riverbend the next day. The sky was a low, oppressive gray, threatening snow. I went straight to Maple Grove. Maggie was waiting for me. She looked better than she had at the bank, less shell-shocked, more determined. We didn't waste time with pleasantries. I helped her over to the small closet in the corner of her room. "It's in the bottom drawer," she said. "The metal box. I kept copies. I always kept copies." I pulled out a heavy gray lockbox. Maggie fished a small key from a chain around her neck. We spent the next 3 hours sitting on her bed, surrounded by paper. It was a forensic audit of a relationship. There were bank statements, insurance policies, and legal forms going back 20 years. "Here," I said, pulling out a document titled Durable Power of Attorney. It was dated 6 years ago. Maggie squinted at it. "I remember that," she said. "Elaine told me it was just for medical emergencies, in case I fell into a coma. She said she needed it to talk to the doctors. I read the fine print. It wasn't just for medical decisions. It granted Elaine broad powers over Maggie's assets, including the right to sell property, open accounts, and manage investments. And look at this." I said. I held up a change of beneficiary form for a small life insurance policy my grandfather had left. Originally, the beneficiary was the estate of Margaret Hale. But 4 years ago, it had been changed to Elaine Simmons. The signature at the bottom read, Margaret Hale. I looked at the date. July 14th, 2019. Where were you in July of 2019? Grandma? I asked. Maggie closed her eyes, thinking. That was the summer I had pneumonia. I was in the rehab center for 3 weeks. I was on so much medication I didn't know what day it was. I took a picture of the signature. It was shaky, trailing off at the end. It looked nothing like Maggie's crisp, schoolteacher script. We found more. A car title transferred to Elaine for $1. A joint checking account opened at a bank Maggie had never used, with overdraft protection linked to Maggie's savings. I scanned everything with my phone, my stomach churning. I sent the files to Jenna in batches. By the time we finished, the sun had gone down. The room was shadowed. Maggie sat on the edge of the bed, holding a carbon copy of a check written to cash for $5,000. I trusted her, Maggie whispered. She is my daughter. I knew she was bad with money. I knew she was desperate, but I didn't think she would devour me. She didn't just devour you. Grandma, I said, my voice hard. She used you to feed herself. My phone pinged. It was an email from Jenna. I have looked at the first batch. The email read, the signatures on the insurance forms are highly suspect. The slant is different. Also, I cross-referenced the dates. The big withdrawal in 2008? That aligns exactly with the month Elaine dissolved her LLC for the design business. The credit card opening coincides with a judgment filed against her in small claims court. She is plugging holes in her own ship with planks ripped from yours. I stared at the screen. It was so clear. It was a timeline of desperation, but as I sat there, watching Maggie's hands tremble, a treacherous feeling bubbled up in my chest. I fought it, but it was there. Empathy. I remembered 2008. I was 16. I remembered coming home from school and finding Elaine asleep on the couch in her uniform, her apron still on, smelling of grease. She had been working double shifts at the diner after the design business imploded. I remembered her waking up, her eyes red-rimmed, and forcing a smile. I'm doing it for you kids, she had said. I want you to have a normal life. She had bought me the prom dress. She had paid for the braces. She had kept the house warm. She had stolen the money to do it. Yes, but she hadn't spent it on vacations or jewelry. She had spent it on survival. She had cannibalized her mother to feed her children. It didn't make it right. It made it a crime. But it was a crime born of a terrifying, suffocating love mixed with incompetence. I felt sick. I hated her for what she did to Maggie. I hated her for the bill she sent me. But I couldn't stop seeing her tired face, the desperation in her eyes when the creditors called. Sarah? Maggie asked. You have that look, the one you get when you are thinking too much. I'm okay. I lied. I packed up the papers. I needed to get out of there. I needed air. I returned to Hartfield the next morning for a job interview. It was a second-round interview with a boutique consultancy firm, the kind of place that prided itself on ethical wealth management. It was exactly the kind of job I needed. Stable, quiet, and respectable. I set up my laptop in my kitchen, making sure the background was a blank white wall. I put on a blazer over my pajama bottoms. I practiced my smile. The interview was over Zoom. The hiring manager was a woman named Chloe, who had a sleek bob and a background in ESG investing. We talked for 20 minutes about market trends and risk assessment. I was nailing it. I could feel the rhythm returning, the confidence that came from knowing my field. Then, Chloe paused. She looked down at her notes, then back at the camera. Her expression had shifted. It was pitying, slightly embarrassed. Sarah, she said, we really like your resume. You have excellent experience, but we do standard background checks, which include a social media sweep. I froze. My social media was locked down. LinkedIn was professional. I don't have much of a presence, I said, my smile faltering. It's not your account, Chloe said gently. Were you aware that you were tagged in a series of public posts by an Elaine Simmons? My blood ran cold. No, I said. Chloe hesitated. It seems to be a family dispute. She posted an image of an invoice, and there is a lot of commentary about you being a financial failure, about you abandoning the family. I stared at the green dot of the camera. I could hear the radiator clanking in the background. My mother and I are having a disagreement, I said, my voice tight. It is private. It doesn't look private, Chloe said. Look, Sarah, we handle sensitive client assets. Reputation is everything. We can't have drama attached to our associates. Clients Google people. If they see that your own mother is claiming you owe her 6 figures and calling you a failure. She stopped mid-sentence. She didn't need to say the rest. I understand. I said. I felt the tears pricking my eyes. Hot and humiliating. We'll be in touch. Chloe said. The screen went black. I sat there for a long moment, staring at my own reflection in the dark monitor. Then, I opened my phone. I went to Facebook. I hadn't looked in days. There it was. Elaine had posted 3 hours ago. It's sad when you pour your life into a child, and they grow up to think they are entitled to your retirement. Some people think they are too good to pay their debts. Some people think they can just walk away. Attached was a cropped photo of the invoice. It showed the total, $347,000, and it showed my name. The comments were a cesspool. Relatives I hadn't seen in 10 years were chiming in. So sorry you are going through this. Elaine. Kids these days have no respect. Aunt Linda, praying for your heart. She always was a bit selfish, wasn't she? Cousin Becky. Wow, that is a lot of money. Shame on her. A neighbor I barely knew. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the family group chat. Aunt Linda. Sarah, honey, maybe you should just call your mom. This looks bad. Cousin Becky. Yeah, airing dirty laundry isn't a good look. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the couch cushions with a muffled thud. She had done it. She had actually done it. She had weaponized the invoice. She had destroyed my professional reputation because I wouldn't pay a bill for my own childhood. The rage that filled me was white hot. It burned away the empathy I had felt the night before. It burned away the memory of her tired eyes. I walked over, picked up the phone, and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice was wary. Take it down, I said. My voice was low, shaking with the effort to not scream. Take it down right now. Sarah, she said, I see you finally decided to call. You cost me a job. Mom, I said, I just got off an interview. They saw your post. They saw you calling me a failure. They won't hire me. Are you happy? Is this what accountability looks like? Destroying my ability to actually make money? I didn't mention the company, Elaine said defensively. I didn't tag them. You tagged me, I screamed. You put my name next to a lie. It is not a lie, she yelled back. It is the truth. You owe me. I don't owe you anything, I shouted. But you owe Grandma. We found the papers. Mom, we found the transfers. We know about the credit card. We know you forged her signature. The line went dead silent. I waited. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Short, ragged breaths. We are going to a lawyer, I said, pressing the advantage. We are going to expose everything. Unless you take those posts down and admit what you did, then, she broke. It wasn't a slow crumble. It was a collapse. I heard a sob. Raw and ugly. I'm drowning. Sarah, she wailed. I stopped. The sound was terrifying. Elaine Simmons didn't cry. She raged. She manipulated. She didn't wail. I'm going to lose the house. She sobbed. The bank is foreclosing. I haven't paid the mortgage in 6 months. The credit cards are maxed out. They're calling me every day. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I stood in my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, feeling the floor tilt. Foreclosing? I asked. I took a second mortgage to pay for Evan's tuition, she cried. And then the interest rates went up, and the car broke down. And I thought if I could get you to pay, if I could just show you the value. She wasn't making sense. She was babbling. I did it for you, she screamed, her voice cracking. I did everything for you kids. I stole from Maggie because I had to. Your father left me with nothing. I was trying to keep us afloat. The guilt hit me like a physical wave. I heard the panic in her voice, the sheer, animal terror of a woman who had been running on a treadmill of debt for 20 years and had finally fallen off. If you don't help me, I'm going to be on the street. She wept. I'm your mother. Sarah, please. I'm sorry about the post. I'll take it down. Just, please, don't let me lose the house. I closed my eyes. I saw the house, the peeling paint, the loose gutter. It was a trap, but it was also my home. It was where she had raised me. I need to think. I whispered, Don't abandon me, she begged. Please. I hung up. I sank onto the floor of my kitchen. I pulled my knees to my chest. She was a criminal. She was a narcissist. She had sabotaged my career, but she was also my mother. And she was terrified. The conflict tore at me. Could I really pursue a legal case that would leave her homeless? Could I really be the one to push her over the edge? My phone rang again. I stared at it, thinking it was her calling back to beg some more, but the name on the screen was Grandma Maggie. I wiped my face and answered. Sarah? Maggie's voice was different tonight. It wasn't the frail voice of the victim I had seen at the bank. It was sharp. It was fierce. Grandma, I said, I just talked to Mom. I know, Maggie said. Evan called me. He said she is hysterical. He said she told you about the house. She says she's losing it. I said, she says she's going to be homeless. Good, Maggie said. I blinked. What? Let her lose it, Maggie said. Her voice was cold iron. Sarah, listen to me. Do not give her a dime. Do not feel sorry for her. Grandma, she's desperate. She has been desperate for 40 years, Maggie snapped. And for 40 years, she has used that desperation to steal from everyone who loved her. She stole from me. She stole from your grandfather. She stole from you. But the house? It is not her house, Maggie said. It never was. I paid the down payment. I paid the mortgage for the first 10 years. She just lived in it. Maggie took a breath. Sarah, I am not going to let her drag you down. I saw what she posted. Evan sent me the screenshot. She is trying to ruin you to save herself. That is not what a mother does. That is what a parasite does. The word hung in the air. Parasite. I have records. Sarah, Maggie said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Not just the bank statements we found. I have other records. Other records? I asked. I knew, Maggie said. I knew one day someone might need to know the truth. I knew she would try to rewrite history, so I wrote it down. She paused. The next time you come, Sarah, I need you to look in the back of my closet, behind the shoe rack. There is a loose panel in the drywall. I hid a small box there. Another box? I asked. The real box, Maggie said. Retrieve it, but do not open it until we are together. It contains the accounting she doesn't know about. What kind of accounting? The kind that proves who actually paid for that family, Maggie said. And Sarah? When you see the numbers, you won't feel guilty anymore. You will just be angry. She hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment. The sun had set, casting long shadows across the floor. I had thought the $347,000 bill was the end of the story. I had thought the stolen trust fund was the twist. But Maggie's voice, cold and hard as flint, told me that we hadn't even reached the bottom yet. I stood up. I went to the fridge and poured a glass of water. My hand was steady now. I wasn't going to save Elaine. Not yet. First, I was going to see what was in the wall. I was going to see the real cost. I packed my bag again. I was going back to Riverbend, not to negotiate, to excavate. The closet in Maggie's room at Maple Grove smelled of mothballs and cedar, a scent that instantly transported me back to the linen closet in the hallway of my childhood home. Maggie sat in her armchair, her hands gripping the armrests, directing me like a seasoned foreman. Push the shoe rack to the left. Sarah, she instructed, watch out for the orthopedic sandals. I shoved the plastic rack aside. Behind it, The drywall looked unassuming, but when I ran my hand along the baseboard, I felt a slight give. It was a panel, cut with precision years ago and painted over to blend in. I wedged my fingernails into the seam and pried it open. Inside, nestled in the insulation, was a heavy metal box. It was the kind of fireproof lockbox people bought in the 90s to store birth certificates and savings bonds. It was cool to the touch and coated in a fine layer of gray dust. I pulled it out, the weight of it straining my wrists, and carried it to the bed. Maggie produced a small, brass key from the pocket of her cardigan. Her hand trembled as she held it out to me. "You open it," she said. "I haven't looked inside since the day I moved in here." I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying, mechanical clunk. I lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in soft, faded dish towels, were stacks of notebooks. They were old composition books, the black and white marbled kind I used to use for spelling tests in elementary school. Beneath them were bundles of papers secured with brittle rubber bands, carbon copies of checks, bank deposit slips, and handwritten letters. I picked up the top notebook. The cover was labeled in Maggie's neat cursive script, "Loans and Gifts, 1985 to 1995. I opened it. The pages were filled with columns. Date, description, amount, February 3rd, 1986, rent assistance for Elm Street house, $600. July 12th, 1988, car repair, transmission for Elaine's station wagon, $850. December 20th, 1990, Christmas gifts for Sarah and Evan. Elaine couldn't afford, $400. I flipped through the pages, my heart thudding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. It went on and on. It was a chronicle of crisis management. Every time a tire blew, every time a utility bill was past due, every time life happened, Maggie had been there with her checkbook. I picked up the second notebook, 1996 to 2005. August 10th, 1998. Legal fees for Mark's DUI, $2,500. March 15th, 2001. Seed money for Elaine's interiors, $5,000. September 4th, 2004. Braces for Sarah, down payment, $1,500. I stopped. I stared at the entry. Braces for Sarah. On Elaine's invoice, the cost of raising a failure bill she had sent me, she had listed my orthodontics as a $5,200 expense she had borne alone. She had wielded my straight teeth as a weapon of guilt, but here, in black ink, was the truth. Maggie had paid the down payment. I looked at Maggie. She was staring at her hands, her face pale. She always told me she would pay me back. Maggie whispered, every time I wrote a check. She would cry. She would say, "Mom, I promise, as soon as Mark gets a bonus, as soon as the business takes off, I'll pay you back." So I wrote it down, not to punish her, but because I believed her. I wanted to keep the record straight so when she was ready, we would know where we stood. I picked up the final notebook, 2006 to present. This one was different. The handwriting was more jagged, the entries more frantic. This was the era of the divorce, the recession, the collapse of the design business. June 1st, 2008. Mortgage arrears to stop foreclosure, $12,000. September 12th, 2008. Transfer to Elaine for Sarah's college trust, liquidation, $112,450. There it was, the theft we had discovered at the bank, recorded here as a transfer, but next to it, Maggie had written a note in red ink. Elaine promised this is a loan against the estate. She swears it is the only way to save the house. She promises to replenish before Sarah graduates. She never replenished it, I said, my voice hollow. Keep reading, Maggie said. Look at the last page. I flipped to the end of the notebook. There, on the final line. Maggie had done a grand total. She had added up every check, every cash transfer, every bailout from 1985 to the present. The number was written in bold, double underlined strokes. Total support provided, $347,000. $280. I stopped breathing. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. $347,000. I reached into my bag and pulled out the crumpled invoice Elaine had sent me. I smoothed it out on the bedspread next to the ledger. Elaine's total, $347,000. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a mirror. Elaine hadn't calculated the cost of raising me based on receipts for diapers and food. She had taken the number Maggie had given her, the sum total of her own dependency, and she had projected it onto me. She had taken the shame of what she owed her mother and rebranded it as the debt I owed her. She knew. I whispered. She knew exactly how much she took from you. She hates this book, Maggie said softly. About 5 years ago, we had a fight. She wanted money for a new car. I told her no. I took out this ledger and showed her the total. I told her, Elaine, you have spent your inheritance 3 times over. Maggie looked up at me. Her eyes filled with tears. She screamed at me. Sarah. She told me I was holding money over her head to control her. She said I kept these records to make her feel small. She said I was charging her for love, and now she's doing the exact same thing to me. I said, she took the weapon she felt you used on her, and she turned it on me. It was sick. It was twisted, but in a horrifying way. It made sense. Elaine's entire worldview was transactional. She felt crushed by the debt she owed Maggie. So she created a narrative where I owed her the same amount, balancing her internal ledger. If I paid her, she could pay Maggie, or at least, she could feel like she wasn't the failure. We need to match this up, I said, my voice hardening. We need to see where the money actually went. I spent the next 4 hours sitting on the floor of the nursing home, my laptop open, conducting a forensic autopsy of my family's finances. I took photos of every page of the ledger and emailed them to Jenna Park. Jenna responded within the hour. Sarah, this is gold, but it's also a smoking gun for something else. Look at the entry for August 2010. I looked, August 15th, 2010. Tuition check for Lockridge University, $8,000. I frowned. I never received a check for $8,000. My freshman year tuition was paid entirely by student loans and a small Pell Grant. I pulled up my old student loan records, which I had saved in a cloud drive years ago. I checked the disbursement dates. There was no record of an $8,000 payment from any outside source. I texted Jenna. It never hit the school, Jenna replied. Then look at the endorsement. If Maggie has the canceled check, see who signed it. I dug through the bundle of checks wrapped in the dish towel. I found it. Check number 409, written to Lockridge University. But on the back, it hadn't been stamped by the university bursar. It had been signed Elaine Simmons and endorsed for deposit only into an account ending in 4429. She intercepted the check. I said, feeling a wave of nausea. She told Grandma she was paying my tuition. She took the check, and she deposited it into her own account. I looked at Maggie. She was watching me, her face gray. She stole your education. Sarah, Maggie whispered. I wrote that check thinking it was paying for your dorm. She told me you were so grateful. She told me you cried when you got it. I did cry that week, I said, staring at the check. But I cried because I was eating peanut butter out of a jar for dinner and wondering if I should drop out. The rage was a physical thing now, a hot coal in my chest. But as I kept cross-referencing, another feeling began to mix with it, something colder and more painful. I saw an entry from 2012. Dental surgery for Elaine, $4,000. I remembered that year. Elaine had an abscessed tooth. Her face had swollen up like a balloon. She had been in agony for weeks, refusing to go to the dentist because she didn't have insurance. Finally, she had gone, and she told us the dentist had given her a payment plan, but he hadn't. Maggie had paid for it. I saw another entry. Evan's asthma medicine, $300. I saw heating oil, $600. I saw the terrifying banality of poverty. Elaine wasn't buying fur coats. She wasn't gambling. She was drowning. She was a single mother with no skills, a failed business, and a lifestyle she couldn't sustain. desperately patching holes in the hull of a sinking ship with money she stripped from her mother and her daughter. I hated her. God, I hated her for the lies. But looking at these columns, I also saw the terror. I saw a woman who had spent 40 years waking up at 3 a.m, wondering if the lights would be on when her children came home from school. She shielded us from the reality, I said quietly. By stealing from you, she didn't want you to know we were poor. Maggie said, she was so proud, too proud. She thought if she admitted she couldn't afford the house, she was admitting she was a bad mother, so she became a thief to pretend she was a provider. It was a tragedy of Greek proportions, played out in the suburbs of Ohio. My phone buzzed. It was Evan. Can we talk? I'm at the Parkway Diner. Mom is... She's spiraling. I looked at Maggie. Go. She said, get him on our side. We can't save Elaine. Sarah. But we can save Evan. The Parkway Diner was a chrome and neon relic off the interstate, the kind of place where truckers and insomniacs congregated. Evan was sitting in a booth in the back, staring into a cup of black coffee. He looked terrible. His eyes were shadowed, his hair unwashed. He wore a faded university hoodie that made him look like a teenager. I slid into the booth opposite him. He didn't look up. She wants me to sign a loan. He said, no hello, no preamble. Just the facts. What kind of loan? I asked. A private personal loan. He said, $20,000. She says it's to cover the arrears on the house so we can sell it properly. She says if I don't sign. The bank takes it next week, and we lose all the equity. There is no equity. Evan, I said gently. She has refinanced that house 3 times. Maggie showed me the records. Evan put his head in his hands. I know. Deep down, I know. But she's my mom. Sarah. She's crying. She's throwing up. She says if I don't help her, I'm just like you, a traitor. He looked up at me, his eyes wet. She told me to tell the lawyer that Grandma is senile. He whispered. She said if anyone asks about the money, I have to testify that Grandma has been confused since 2015, that she gave Mom permission to manage everything and then forgot. I felt a chill run down my spine. That was the legal defense, lack of capacity, and she wants me to say you stole cash from her purse when you were in high school, Evan added, his voice breaking. She wants to paint a pattern of behavior, to discredit you. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. His skin was clammy. Evan, listen to me. She is drowning. And when people drown, they climb on top of the people trying to save them. She will drown you to keep her head above water for 1 more minute. I can't let her go to jail. Sarah, he said, I can't. I'm not asking you to send her to jail. I lied. I wasn't sure if that was true yet, but I'm asking you to help me protect Grandma. That money she wants you to sign for? It won't save the house. It will just mean you start your life $20,000 in debt, just like she did to me. Do you want to be 32 and paying for a house you don't own? Evan shook his head. Then I need you to send me the documents. I said, send me the loan application. Send me the emails where she asks you to lie about Grandma's memory. Why? He asked. Because we need leverage. I said, we are going to make her stop. We are going to make her settle. But I can't do it if she thinks she has you in her corner. Evan looked out the window at the passing cars. He looked young and scared and incredibly tired. She treats me like an investment, he said softly. She told me last week that since she paid for my undergrad, I owe her 10% of my future salary. 10%. Sarah, like a tax. That's not love. Evan, I said, that's a business transaction, and it's a bad deal. He pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, then slid it across the table to show me. It was an email from Elaine. Subject: Talking points for legal. Evan, honey, when you speak to the attorney, remember to mention that Grandma often forgets where she puts her checkbook. Also, remember that time Sarah took $20? We need to establish that Maggie is unreliable and Sarah is vindictive. This is how we save the family. It was cold-blooded. It was calculated. Forward it to me. I said, He hesitated for a second, then tapped send. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered to the air. I drove back to Maple Grove with the evidence in my inbox. The sky was pitch black now, the wind howling across the flat fields. I felt a grim sense of purpose. When I got back to the room, Maggie was sitting at her small writing desk. She had pushed aside the medication bottles and the tissue box to make a clear workspace. She had a pen in her hand and a legal pad in front of her. "Did you get it?" she asked without turning around. "I got it," I said. "Evan is out. He sent me the emails." She was coaching him to perjure himself. Maggie nodded. She didn't look surprised. She just looked sad. "Then it is time to finish this," she said. She pointed to a stack of papers on the bed. Jenna had emailed them over an hour ago, and Maggie had printed them on the facility's printer down the hall. "This is the revocation of power of attorney," Maggie said, tapping the first pile. "Effective immediately. This," she tapped the second pile, "is the appointment of a fiduciary. I am hiring a professional firm in Columbus to manage my assets. No family members, not Elaine, not you, not Evan." I nodded. That was smart. It removed the accusation that I was manipulating her for my own gain. "And this," she said, picking up the third document, "is my new will." She handed it to me. I scanned the legalese. I, Margaret Hale, being of sound mind, hereby revoke all prior wills. It restructured everything. The house, which was legally Maggie's, despite Elaine living in it, was to be placed in a trust. It would be sold. The proceeds would be used to pay back the estate for the misappropriated funds, and the remainder would be split. But it was the cover letter that made my throat close up. Maggie had dictated it, and Jenna had formatted it. But the title was all Maggie. Invoice for services rendered subject. Cost of raising a daughter who forgot she was loved. I read the opening paragraph. To Elaine Simmons, "You sent your daughter a bill for $347,000 because you felt the world owed you for your sacrifices. You forgot that I have kept the receipts of your life. The total below, $347,280, is not a debt I am charging you. It is the price I paid to keep you from drowning. I do not want it back. I only want you to stop pretending you did this alone." I looked up at Maggie. She was staring at the wall, her jaw set. "I don't want to mail this," she said. No, she said. "If I mail it, she will just tear it up. She will tell herself another lie. She will tell Evan I am senile and you are a forger." She turned to face me. "She has a meeting on Thursday," Maggie said, "at Crestline Wealth Advisors. How do you know?" "She told me," Maggie said. "She came by yesterday, before you arrived. She was sweet as pie. She told me she was going to meet with a man named Trevor Lane to consolidate our assets for better growth. She wants me to sign over the rest of my investment accounts to her management. She wants to clean you out." I said, "Yes," Maggie said. "She thinks I'm going to sign the papers she brings me. She thinks she is going to walk into that office and take control." Maggie's eyes flashed with a steely light I had never seen before. "I want to be there. Sarah, I want to walk into that office. I want to hand her this letter in front of her financial advisor. I want her to see that I am not confused, I am not frail, and I am not her ATM. It was a trap, a meticulously laid, public trap." "Are you sure?" I asked. "It's going to be brutal. I am 84 years old," Maggie said. "I have survived a hip replacement, pneumonia, and the death of my husband. I can survive my daughter." She picked up the pen and signed the cover letter with a flourish. "Call Jenna," she said. "Tell her to meet us at Crestline on Thursday at 2:00, and tell her to bring the notary seal." I looked at the document in her hand. The cost of raising a daughter. It was the ultimate counterattack. It wasn't revenge, exactly. It was a reckoning. And on Thursday, Elaine Simmons was going to learn that the Bank of Mom was finally, permanently closed. The lobby of Crestline Wealth Advisors was designed to smell like money. It was a subtle scent, a mix of leather polish, fresh orchids, and the crisp, recycled air of high-end commercial HVAC systems. I sat in the conference room, my hands folded on the mahogany table, watching the second hand on the wall clock tick past 2 o'clock. The room was a fishbowl of glass and steel, overlooking the manicured center of Riverbend. At the head of the table sat Trevor Lane, a financial planner who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in non-threatening competence. He wore a navy suit and a pained expression, his eyes darting between the papers in front of him and the monitor mounted on the wall. On the screen, Jenna Park was pixelated but imposing. She sat in her cluttered office in Hartfield, her face set in a professional mask of neutrality. Beside me, in her wheelchair, was Grandma Maggie. She had insisted on dressing for the occasion. She wore a cream-colored blouse and a silk scarf tied neatly at her throat. Her hands were resting on a leather folder, her knuckles white but steady. Evan stood near the door, leaning against the wall as if he wanted to melt into the drywall. He was wearing the same hoodie he had worn at the diner, a visual rejection of the formality Elaine prized. He wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't look at Maggie. He just stared at his sneakers. Vibrating with anxiety, we were the ambush. At 2:05, the heavy glass door swung open. Elaine Simmons strode in. She looked magnificent. She was wearing her best blazer, a sharp white structured piece she had bought years ago when the design business was briefly profitable. Her hair was blown out into a helmet of auburn perfection. She carried a designer handbag that I knew was a knockoff, swinging it with the confidence of a woman who owned the building. "Sorry I am late," she announced, her voice bright and commanding. Traffic on Main Street was a nightmare. "Trevor, it is so good to see you. I have some ideas about the—" She stopped. She had taken 3 steps into the room before she processed the tableau. Her smile froze, then shattered. Her eyes whipped from Trevor to me, then to Evan, and finally rested on Maggie. "What is this?" she asked. Her voice dropped, losing its manufactured warmth. "Please, have a seat. Mrs. Simmons?" Trevor said. He gestured to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table. Elaine didn't move. She clutched her handbag tighter. "I made an appointment for a private consultation," she said, her tone sharpening. "Regarding my mother's accounts, why is the entire family here? And who is that on the screen?" "That is Jenna Park," Trevor said, clearing his throat. "She is Mrs. Hale's attorney." Elaine let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Attorney? Mom doesn't have an attorney. Mom has me. Please sit down." "Elaine," Maggie said. It was the first time Maggie had spoken. Her voice was quiet, but in the acoustic perfection of the conference room, it sounded like a gavel strike. Elaine stared at her mother. For a second, I saw a flicker of genuine fear behind her eyes, the panic of an actor realizing they are on the wrong stage. But she shoved it down. She pulled out the chair and sat, smoothing her blazer with aggressive, jerky movements. "Okay," she said, crossing her arms. "Let's play this game. Sarah, I assume this is your doing? Trying to create drama because you are angry about the bill?" "This is not about Sarah," Trevor said. He picked up a document from the stack in front of him. "I am afraid the purpose of this meeting has changed. Mrs. Simmons, Mrs. Hale is my client of record. She has instructed me to update the governance of her assets effective immediately." He slid a paper across the long table. It stopped inches from Elaine's hands. "What is this?" Elaine asked. "Not touching it. It is a revocation of power of attorney," Trevor said. "It removes you as the agent for your mother's financial and medical decisions. It also removes you as a co-signer and co-owner on all accounts held at this institution, and notifies you of the same removal at Northbridge Credit Union and First National Bank." Elaine stared at the paper. Her face went blotchy, red patches appearing on her neck. "You can't do that," she said. "It is already done." Trevor said softly, "The documents were notarized yesterday and filed this morning." Elaine looked up, her eyes blazing. She pointed a manicured finger at me. "You did this," she hissed. "You got in her head. You are manipulating a senile old woman because you want the money for yourself." I didn't say anything. I just watched her. Elaine turned to Trevor. "My mother is not competent," she shouted. "She is 84 years old. She doesn't know what she is signing. Sarah probably told her it was a birthday card. I have been managing her life for 10 years. Mrs. Simmons. Jenna's voice cut in from the monitor. It was calm, dry, and terrifyingly precise. I am Jenna Park. I am a certified elder law attorney. I spent 4 hours with Mrs. Hale yesterday. I can assure you, and the court, that she is fully capacitated. She knows exactly what she is signing, and she knows exactly why she is signing it. Elaine slammed her hand on the table. "This is illegal!" she screamed. "You can't just cut me out. I have rights. You have nothing," Maggie said. Elaine stopped shouting. She turned to look at her mother. Maggie hadn't moved. She was still sitting perfectly straight in her wheelchair, her hands resting on the leather folder. "I trusted you." "Elaine," Maggie said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was heavy with a profound, exhausting disappointment. "I gave you power of attorney because I thought you would protect me. Instead, you picked me clean. I took care of you," Elaine cried, her voice cracking. "I visit you every week. I bring you groceries. I manage the house. You live in my house," Maggie corrected, "and you manage my money into your own pocket." Elaine opened her mouth to argue, but Maggie reached into her folder. She pulled out the document we had prepared, the counter bill. She slid it down the table. "Read it," Maggie said. Elaine looked down at the document. It was titled, Invoice for Services Rendered. I watched her eyes scan the page. I saw the moment she recognized the format. It was identical to the one she had sent me. The same font, the same layout. I saw her eyes widen as she hit the total. $347,280. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "This is a joke," she whispered. "It is not a joke," Trevor said. He picked up his copy of the ledger summary. "We have reviewed the underlying financial records provided by Mrs. Hale. They document 40 years of transfers, loans, and payments made to you or on your behalf." Trevor flipped a page. "More concerning," he said, his voice dropping to a murmur, "are the irregularities in the banking documents. We have identified 16 instances of signatures that do not appear to match Mrs. Hale's handwriting, specifically, the withdrawal of the college trust in 2008. Elaine went pale. She looked at Evan, who was still staring at his shoes. "Evan," she said, her voice trembling, Tell them how confused Grandma gets. Tell them she gave me permission to use those funds." Evan didn't move. "Evan!" she snapped. Evan looked up. His face was tear-streaked, but his jaw was set. "I can't, Mom," he said. "What do you mean you can't?" she demanded. "I can't lie for you," he said. "I'm not going to tell them she's crazy. She's not crazy. And I saw the emails. You asked me to lie." Elaine flinched as if he had slapped her. Jenna spoke from the screen. "Mrs. Simmons," she said, "let me be clear about the exposure here. We have evidence of forgery, identity theft regarding the credit card opened in Mrs. Hale's name, and elder financial abuse. In this state, those are felonies. If we take this to the prosecutor, you are looking at significant prison time, and we have the ledgers to prove a pattern of behavior going back decades." Elaine sank back in her chair. She looked small suddenly. The blazer seemed too big for her shoulders. "You're going to send me to jail?" she whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked at me. "Sarah? You're going to send your own mother to jail?" I felt a twist in my gut. It was the old hook. The one she had used on me for 30 years. Guilt. I didn't answer. I looked at Maggie. This was her play. "We do not want to send you to jail." "Elaine," Maggie said, "I do not want my daughter in a cell." Maggie opened the folder again. She pulled out the final document, the settlement agreement. "I want you to sign this," Maggie said. Elaine looked at the paper. "What is it?" "It is an agreement," Jenna explained. "It stipulates that you will immediately list the property at 42 Elm Street for sale. The proceeds will be placed in a trust managed by a fiduciary. The trust will pay off the debts you incurred in Mrs. Hale's name, including the unauthorized credit cards and the mortgage arrears." "Sell the house?" Elaine gasped. "But that's my home. I've lived there for 30 years. It is my house, Maggie said firmly, and you have used it as a collateral piggy bank until there is almost nothing left. We are selling it before the bank takes it, Jenna continued. The agreement also states that you will repay the misappropriated funds, specifically the $112,000 taken from the Sarah Simmons Education Trust, from your share of the estate. However, since you do not have the liquidity, your inheritance will be placed in a strict spendthrift trust. You will receive a monthly allowance for living expenses. You will have no access to the principal. You will never manage money again. Elaine looked around the room, frantic. An allowance? She said. Like a child? You spent your adulthood spending like a child, Maggie said. Now you will live like one. I can't sell the house, Elaine sobbed. Where will I go? You can rent an apartment, I said. My voice surprised me. It was steady, like I do, like millions of people do. You'll have an allowance. You won't be on the street, but you won't be the matriarch of the manor anymore. Elaine put her head in her hands. This is cruel. She wept. This is vindictive. You're punishing me for trying to survive. We are stopping you from eating your children, Maggie said. The room was silent, save for Elaine's jagged breathing. If you do not sign, Jenna said, her voice devoid of sympathy. We will file the criminal complaint by 5 o'clock today. The police will be at your door by dinner. Elaine looked at Evan. Evan, please, don't let them do this. Evan walked over to the table. He stood next to Maggie's wheelchair. He put a hand on Maggie's shoulder. Sign it. Mom, he said softly. It's over. The investment didn't pay off. Elaine looked at him with a look of pure betrayal. You're ungrateful, she whispered. Both of you. She reached for the pen Trevor was holding out. Her hand was shaking so badly the pen rattled against the paper. She signed. It was a scrawl, barely legible, a signature of surrender. Trevor took the document and stamped it. Jenna nodded on the screen. Thank you, Mrs. Simmons, Trevor said. I will be in touch regarding the listing agent for the property. Elaine stood up. She swayed slightly, steadying herself on the table. She looked stripped, the confidence, the blazer, the hair. It all looked like a costume now. She gathered her purse. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the handle and turned back. She didn't look at Maggie. She didn't look at Evan. She looked at me. Her eyes were dry now. The tears had evaporated, leaving something hard and cold behind. You think you won, she said softly. You think she is the saint and I am the sinner. She is the one who paid for us. I said. Elaine laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. She paid. Elaine said, Oh yes, she paid. She loves to pay. It's how she buys the right to judge. She took a step toward me. You asked about the lost inheritance. Sarah, you were so obsessed with that trust fund. It was my money. I said. Elaine leaned in close. I could smell the stale coffee on her breath. Ask her where it came from, she whispered. Ask your saint of a grandmother where she got the money to start that trust in 1992. Because she hasn't told you what she did to me before you were born. What are you talking about? I asked. She smiled. It was a terrifying smile. She sold me out. Sarah, just like she's selling me out now. She just put a better price on it back then. Elaine straightened up. She looked at Maggie with pure venom. Enjoy your victory. Mother, I hope it was worth the price. She turned and walked out. The glass door swung shut behind her, sealing us back in the quiet, expensive air of the conference room. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Maggie let out a long, shuddering breath. She slumped in her wheelchair, the steel in her spine suddenly gone. It's done, she whispered. Evan sat down in the chair Elaine had vacated. He put his head on the table and started to cry. Silent, heaving sobs. I walked over to Maggie. I put my hand on her arm. Grandma? I asked. She looked up at me. Her eyes were tired, ancient. She signed. Maggie said, You're safe. Sarah, the house will be sold. Your debt. We will find a way to make it right. I looked at the closed door. Elaine's whisper was still echoing in my ears. She sold me out. Grandma? I said, what did she mean? Maggie flinched. She looked away, staring out the window at the gray skyline of Riverbend. She was just trying to hurt you. Sarah, Maggie said. She was lashing out. Where did the money come from? I asked. The initial deposit for the trust. It was a lot of money for 1992. Granddad was a mechanic. You were a teacher. Where did you get $20,000 to start a trust for a baby? Maggie's hand tightened on the armrest. It was an inheritance, she said. From your great-aunt Clara. I stared at her. I had never heard of a great-aunt Clara. Maggie turned back to me. Her expression was rigid, a mask of finality. It is done. Sarah, we have won. Do not let her poison the victory. She reached out and took my hand. Take me home, she said. I am very tired. I looked at her face. I saw the love there. I saw the fierce protection that had driven her to document 40 years of financial bleeding. But for the first time, I also saw a shadow, a flicker of something that looked remarkably like guilt. I squeezed her hand. Okay, Grandma, I said. Let's go home. But as I wheeled her out of the office, past the smiling receptionist, and into the cold afternoon air, the question gnawed at me. Elaine was a liar. She was a manipulator. But she was also a woman who believed, with every fiber of her being, that she had been wronged, and looking at the back of Maggie's white head. I couldn't shake the feeling that the ledger still wasn't balanced. There was one more account to open, the one in the box she had told me not to touch, the one hidden behind the shoes, the one that contained the truth about what happened before I was born. We drove back to Maple Grove in silence. Evan followed us in his car. He looked like a ghost behind the wheel, his face pale in my rearview mirror. When we got Maggie settled in her room, she refused dinner. Just tea, she said, and then I want to sleep. I made her tea in the small kitchenette. I watched her drink it, her hand shaking slightly as she lifted the cup. You did good today. Grandma, I said. She lowered the cup. She looked at me with those sharp blue eyes. I did what was necessary. She said, justice is not always good. Sarah, sometimes it is just necessary. She handed me the cup. Go, she said. Go be with your brother. He needs you. And Sarah? Yes? Do not open that other envelope, the one in the box. Not yet. Why not? I asked. Because you are angry at your mother, Maggie said, and if you read it now, you might forgive her. And she does not deserve forgiveness yet. She needs to feel the consequences. I frowned. Forgive her? How could a financial record make me forgive the woman who stole my future? Promise me, Maggie said. I promise. I lied. I kissed her forehead. It felt cool and papery. Good night, my girl, she whispered. I walked out of the room. I met Evan in the hallway. You okay? I asked him. He shrugged. I just watched my mom get evicted from her life. He said, I feel like I just killed her. You didn't. I said, you stopped her from killing us. I hugged him. He held on tight, like he was drowning. Go home. Ev, I said. Go to your apartment. Turn off your phone. Sleep. What are you going to do? He asked. I'm going to stay at the motel one more night. I said, I want to make sure she doesn't try to come back here and harass Grandma. Evan nodded and walked away. His shoulders slumped. I waited until the elevator doors closed. Then I turned around. I didn't go to the motel. I went back into Maggie's room. She was already asleep, her breathing shallow and rhythmic. The stress of the day had exhausted her. I crept across the floor, my sneakers making no sound on the carpet. I went to the closet. I moved the shoe rack. I pried open the panel. The metal box was still there. I lifted it out. I carried it to the bathroom and closed the door. Locking it, I sat on the closed toilet lid. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. I opened the box. I moved the ledgers aside. I moved the bundle of checks. At the very bottom, beneath a stack of savings bonds, was a small, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with wax, an old-fashioned touch that felt heavy with significance. On the front, in Maggie's handwriting from a much younger era, were the words, "For Sarah, to be read only when she is old enough to understand the cost." I held the envelope. It felt thick. Elaine's voice echoed in my head. "She sold me out." Maggie's voice echoed in response. "If you read it now, you might forgive her." I looked at the date written in the corner of the envelope. January 1992. The month I was born. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. Inside was a single document and a handwritten letter. I unfolded the document first. It was a legal agreement, a settlement, drafted by a law firm in Chicago. Parties, Mark Simmons and Margaret Hale. I frowned. My father and my grandmother. I scanned the legalese. It was an agreement regarding custody and payment, in exchange for the sum of $20,000. Mark Simmons agrees to relinquish all claims to the marital home and to grant full physical custody of the minor child. Sarah Simmons. To Elaine Simmons. Furthermore, Mark Simmons agrees to depart the state of Ohio and refrain from contact for a period of no less than 5 years. I stared at the paper. Maggie had paid my father to leave. She had paid him $20,000, the exact amount that started my trust fund, to disappear. I picked up the handwritten letter. It was dated the same day. "Dear Elaine, I did it. He is gone. I know you are heartbroken. I know you think he abandoned you because you weren't enough. But you must never know the truth. You must never know that he didn't leave because he stopped loving you. He left because he loved money more. I bought your freedom, Elaine, and I bought Sarah's safety. He was a gambler and a drunk, and he would have dragged you both down. So I used your father's life insurance to pay him off. I am telling you he left you. I am telling you he ran away. It is a cruel lie, but it is better than the truth, that your husband sold his family for $20,000. I will put the rest of the insurance money in a trust for Sarah. One day, this money will give her the life you deserved. Love, Mom." I lowered the letter. The tile floor of the bathroom seemed to rush up to meet me. Elaine didn't know. For 32 years, Elaine had believed her husband left her because she was a failure. She had believed she wasn't worth staying for. She had built her entire identity, her entire complex of martyrdom and victimization, around the fact that she had been abandoned. Compensation. She had called the stolen money reimbursement for the life I lost. She thought the world owed her because she had been a victim of fate. But she hadn't been a victim of fate. She had been a victim of Maggie's protection. Maggie had orchestrated the defining tragedy of Elaine's life. She had removed the father to save the child, and then she had let her daughter live in the wreckage of that rejection for 4 decades. Elaine's resentment, her need for control, her obsession with money as a substitute for love, it all stemmed from that wound, the wound Maggie had inflicted to save her. I looked at the invoice in my mind. Cost of raising a failure. Elaine thought I was the failure, but she was the one who had been set up to fail. And the money, the $112,000 she stole, in her twisted mind, she was just taking back the price of her husband. I sat there in the harsh light, the letter trembling in my hand. I was furious at Elaine for the bill. I was furious at her for the theft. But Maggie had played God. And she had sent the bill to Elaine every single day in the form of a lie. I stood up. I shoved the letter into my pocket. I needed to get out. I needed to breathe. I walked out of the bathroom, past the sleeping form of the woman who had bought my safety with my mother's sanity. I left the nursing home and drove into the night. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew that the ledger was nowhere near balanced. And tomorrow, when the sun came up, I was going to have to decide which bill to pay. The logic of a liquidation sale is grim. It is the arithmetic of dismantling a life. 2 weeks after the meeting at Crestline Wealth Advisors, a sign went up on the lawn of 42 Elm Street. It was a tasteful wooden post, but the red sticker across the top screamed, "Price reduced." I watched from my car parked across the street as a crew of movers hauled out the furniture. The beige sectional where Elaine had collapsed after double shifts was shoved into a truck. The dining table where she had presented me with the cost of raising a failure invoice was turned on its side, its legs wrapped in plastic, looking like a dead animal. Elaine moved into a 2-bedroom duplex on the south side of Riverbend, near the water treatment plant. It was a humiliating downgrade from the split-level ranch she had lorded over for 3 decades. She did not go quietly. My phone became a repository for her rage. She left voicemails at all hours, her voice oscillating between a tearful tremolo and a jagged, white-hot fury. "Sarah, I hope you are happy." One message said at 2 a.m, "I am sleeping on a mattress on the floor because the movers wouldn't take the bed frame. You did this. You and your grandmother. You conspired to destroy your own mother." Then, 3 hours later, "I just found a box of your old art projects from 2nd grade. I was going to throw them out, but I couldn't. I loved you so much. Sarah, why do you hate me? When will you understand what Maggie actually is?" I didn't answer. I deleted them, but the transcripts lingered in my head like ghosts. I wasn't staying at the motel anymore. I had moved into a guest room at a bed and breakfast in Glenwick to be closer to Maple Grove, because the victory at the wealth advisor's office had cost Maggie more than money. It had cost her reserve of strength. 3 days after Elaine signed the agreement, Maggie collapsed. It wasn't dramatic. She simply slid out of her wheelchair during breakfast. Her heart, tired of beating for everyone else's benefit, had gone into atrial fibrillation. Fluid filled her lungs. By the time the ambulance got her to St. Alden Medical Center, she was gray and gasping. I spent the next week living in the uncomfortable vinyl chair next to her hospital bed. The room smelled of antiseptic and cafeteria soup. The monitors beeped a steady, indifferent rhythm that measured the fading of a matriarch. Elaine tried to visit once. The nurses stopped her at the station. Maggie had put her on the exclusion list. I watched from the doorway as my mother, holding a sad bouquet of grocery store carnations, argued with a security guard before throwing the flowers into a trash can and storming out. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when Maggie woke up. She had been drifting in and out of consciousness for days, but suddenly her eyes were open and clear, fixed on me with an intensity that made me sit up straight. "Sarah," she rasped. "I'm here, Grandma." I poured a cup of water and held the straw to her lips. "The box," she whispered. "The metal box. I have it." I said, "It's safe." "No," she said, shaking her head weakly. "There is another envelope, inside the lining, a smaller one." I frowned. I thought I had found everything. I had found the ledgers. I had found the letter about my father. "You must get it," she said. "But Sarah, you must not open it until I am gone." "Grandma, don't talk like that. Promise me," she said, her grip on my hand surprisingly strong. "It contains the final piece, the instruction. If you open it now, you will argue with me, and I do not have the breath to argue." I promised. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Even now, at the very end, she was managing the flow of information. She was curating her own legacy. Maggie drifted back to sleep. I sat in the dim light, the promise hanging heavy in the room, to distract myself. I pulled out a stack of old letters I had brought from the box to sort through. Correspondence between Maggie and Elaine from the 90s that I hadn't read yet. I unfolded a letter dated March 1993. I was 1 year old. "Elaine," the letter began in Maggie's sharp script. "I have received your request for a loan to expand the kitchen. The answer is no. You have already overdrawn the allowance I provide. I have set up an investment account today for Sarah. I have named her the direct beneficiary. I have done this because you have proven yourself incapable of managing money without emotion. You buy things to fill a hole in yourself, and I will not let you throw my granddaughter's future into that void. You may feel this is a punishment. It is a punishment for your refusal to grow up." My hands sank, the page trembling. It is a punishment. I read another one from 1998. I paid the utility bill. "Elaine, again, do not ask me for cash. You will only spend it on appearances. I am bypassing you because you are a sieve." I looked at Maggie's sleeping face. For weeks, I had viewed her as the victim, the benevolent grandmother exploited by a greedy daughter. And she was that. But she was also something else. She was a controller. She had used money to leash Elaine. She had saved Elaine. Yes, but she had made sure Elaine knew she was being saved. She had framed every check with a lecture. She had codified Elaine's incompetence, written it down, and mailed it to her. Elaine's grievance. That she was always second best, that she was judged, that she was treated like a child, wasn't a delusion. It was the dynamic Maggie had engineered. Elaine had sent me the cost of raising a failure bill because Maggie had spent 40 years sending Elaine a bill labeled cost of being a disappointment. The supposed justice of Maggie's response, the $347,000 counter-invoice, now felt tangled with decades of quiet cruelty. It wasn't just accounting, it was warfare. I rubbed my eyes. The line between the hero and the villain was blurring until it was just a gray smudge of generational trauma. Maggie died on a Thursday morning. I had gone to the cafeteria to get a coffee. I was gone for 10 minutes. When I came back, the room was silent. The monitor had flatlined. A single, unblinking red line. The nurse was already there, turning off the machine. She looked at me with soft, professional pity. "She's gone." "Honey," she said. It was very peaceful. She just stopped. I stood in the doorway. Clutching my cardboard cup, I didn't cry. I felt a massive, crushing wave of grief. But riding underneath it was a shameful, undeniable relief. The tension that had held our family taut for 30 years had finally snapped. The ledger was closed. I walked to the bed. I touched her hand. It was still warm. "Goodbye. Grandma," I whispered. "You won." The nurse handed me a clear plastic bag labeled Patient Personal Effects. Inside was her watch, her wedding ring, and the key to the lockbox. I took it. I walked out of the hospital into the blinding morning sun. The world looked exactly the same, which felt like an insult. 2 days later, I sat on the floor of Maggie's empty room at Maple Grove. I had the metal box in front of me. I ran my fingers along the felt lining of the bottom. There was a lump. I used a nail file to slit the fabric. I pulled out a small, white envelope. It was addressed to Sarah. I opened it. Inside was a document on heavy bonded paper. It was her last will and testament. I scanned it. It was dated 3 days before the meeting at the wealth advisor's office. I, Margaret Hale, leave my entire estate, including the proceeds from the sale of the property at 42 Elm Street and all investment accounts. To my granddaughter, Sarah Simmons, I specifically disinherit my daughter, Elaine Simmons. Beyond the provisions of the settlement agreement regarding the Spendthrift Trust, I appoint Sarah Simmons as the executor of this estate, with full power to pursue any and all legal claims on behalf of the estate. Attached to the will was a handwritten note. "Sarah, if you are reading this, I am gone. You are now the executor. This means you have a choice. We have the evidence to destroy your mother. We have the proof of fraud, theft, and abuse. As executor, you can choose to sue her for the full amount she stole. You can garnish her allowance. You can leave her with nothing but the clothes on her back. The law will support you. She deserves it. She stole your start in life, but I am leaving this decision to you. I spent my life using money to teach lessons. I am not sure they were ever learned. Now you have the checkbook. You can exact the full price of her failure, or you can choose a future where no one sends anyone a bill for love. Choose wisely. The cost of justice is high. Love, Grandma." I lowered the note. She had done it again, even from the grave. She was testing us. She had handed me the weapon, the absolute legal power to ruin Elaine, and asked me if I wanted to pull the trigger. Elaine did not take the news well. When the probate court sent the notice of the will, she panicked. She hired a lawyer, a billboard attorney named Saul Green, who specialized in personal injury and, apparently, desperate probate contests. They filed an objection. Undue influence. Elaine claimed that I had isolated Maggie in her final days, that I had poisoned her mind, and that the will was invalid because Maggie lacked capacity when she signed it. It was a Hail Mary pass, but it forced a hearing. We met in the Darrow County Courthouse 3 weeks after the funeral. The courtroom was paneled in dark oak, smelling of floor wax and old judgments. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Jenna Park. Elaine sat at the defense table with Saul Green. She looked terrible. She had lost weight. Her roots were showing gray. She wore a black suit that looked 2 sizes too big, giving her the appearance of a shrunken child playing dress-up. Evan sat in the back row. He looked like he wanted to be invisible. The hearing was brutal. Jenna didn't hold back. She presented the evidence. Exhibit A. The invoice Elaine sent me. Cost of raising a failure. The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, stared at the document for a long time. Mrs. Simmons? The judge asked, looking over her glasses. You actually sent this to your daughter? Elaine stood up. Her voice was thin. I was trying to make a point. Your Honor, I was trying to show her the value of sacrifice. And Exhibit B, Jenna said, projecting the image onto the screen. It was Maggie's ledger, the $347,000 total of support given to Elaine. And Exhibit C, Jenna continued, the bank records showing the theft of the college trust, the forged signatures, the identity theft. The courtroom was silent. The weight of the evidence was suffocating. Jenna called me to the stand. I walked up, my legs feeling like lead. I swore to tell the truth. Ms. Simmons, Jenna asked, what was the impact of the invoice your mother sent you? I looked at Elaine. She was staring at the table, her hands twisting a tissue. It broke me, I said, my voice trembling. I had just lost my job. I was delivering food to pay rent, and she sent me a bill for being alive. She posted it online. She cost me a job interview. She weaponized my existence to cover her own crimes. Elaine flinched. The judge looked at me. Ms. Simmons, the judge said, the evidence of financial abuse here is overwhelming. The court is prepared to validate the will. However, as the executor and sole beneficiary, you have a claim against your mother for the stolen funds. The judge paused. If you pursue this claim, the estate will garnish Mrs. Simmons's modest trust allowance to repay the debt, based on the figures. She will be left with almost zero disposable income for the rest of her life. She will effectively be destitute. The judge leaned forward. The question is for the estate. Do you wish to enforce the full repayment of the $347,000? Or do you wish to waive the claim and allow the settlement agreement to stand as is? The room went dead still. This was it. The moment Maggie had set up, I looked at Elaine. She looked up at me. Her eyes were blazing with a mix of rage and terror. She knew I held her life in my hands. She knew she deserved to lose it. She had stolen my education. She had stolen my father's love by believing a lie. She had tried to destroy my reputation. She was a parasite. But then I looked at Evan. He was watching me with pleading, conflicted eyes. If I destroyed Elaine, the burden of her survival would fall on him. He would be the one getting the calls at 3 a.m. He would be the one guilted into paying for her groceries. I looked down at my hands. I thought about the 2 bills. Cost of raising a failure. Cost of raising a daughter who forgot she was loved. Both were true. Both were cruel. I thought about Maggie's letter. The cost of justice is high. If I pursued the money, I would be doing exactly what Maggie did. I would be using money to punish. I would be continuing the cycle of transactional love. I would be sending a bill. But if I let it go, if I let her keep her allowance, was that forgiveness? Or was it just weakness? I looked at the judge. I took a breath. The air in the courtroom tasted of dust and history. I thought about the 32-year-old woman delivering Thai food in the rain. I thought about the 16-year-old girl working at the diner. I thought about the baby whose father had been paid to leave. I looked at my mother one last time. She stopped twisting the tissue. She held her breath. I opened my mouth to speak. The words were there, sitting on my tongue, heavy as stones. The choice between ruining her and freeing myself. The courtroom waited. The stenographer's fingers hovered over the keys. And in that suspended silence, between the heartbeat of the past and the first breath of the future, I finally knew what the true cost was. Thank you for listening to My Mother Sent Me a $347,000 Bill Labeled Cost of raising a failure. Grandma's response was far worse. This story explores the deep, tangled roots of financial abuse and the heavy price of family secrets. It asks a difficult question. When someone we love hurts us, does justice mean punishment? Or does it mean breaking the cycle? I would love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in Sarah's position? Would you have pursued the full claim and left Elaine with nothing? Or would you have chosen to walk away? And please, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of betrayal, justice, and the complex reality of human relationships. See you in the next one.